Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to create a graph in Google Sheets. You'll notice I already have Google Sheets open and I have a two-column data table on my sheet. So we can plot this data by first highlighting everything, including the top line. The top line should have your labels and units, and that's fine. Highlight the whole thing, come over and click Insert Chart. And Google will make a guess as to what kind of chart it thinks best represents your data. In this case, it's guessed pretty well, a scatter plot. If it didn't give us a scatter plot, we would need to change it to one most of the time. In science class, when we have XY data, usually we want you to do a scatter plot. We don't want to connect the dots. If it doesn't give us a scatter plot, we can come over here on the right. You'll notice that Chart Editor has opened up. If it doesn't automatically open, double click on your graph and it will open. But when Chart Editor is opened up and the Setup tab is selected, we can select the chart type. So that's where we pick Scatter Plot. And it would be in this list if it wasn't already picked right there. Like I said, we've already picked it, so that's correct. Now, you saw that I grabbed the graph and moved it around. We want to put it where we can see the data table in the graph, because if you're going to submit this Google Sheet, that makes it easy for you to see to work with and easy for the teacher to see to grade. But remember, you can always copy a data table or a graph and paste them into a Google Doc also. Now, there are some cool things we can do with this graph once we've got it here that'll help us show what data we've taken and show the relationship of the data and help us analyze it. So we go over to Customize to get all kinds of options here. And we'll start with Chart Style. Now, Chart Style really just changes the look of it more than anything. If we want to go with a different background color, we could change the background color. We can even put a little border around it if we want to. It really doesn't matter. The important stuff begins next. Chart Axis and Titles. Notice that when we pull down, our first thing that pops up is Chart Title. And Google has guessed at a title for us, and what it's picked is not bad. Stretch in centimeters versus force in newtons. That sounds great. But you can always highlight that and change it to any title that you want. But remember, a proper title for a graph should always be a descriptive title. We should be able to read your title and tell what it is we're going to learn from that graph. This also allows you to pick the color of the text, the font size. You can make it bold or italics, any of that from here. But notice it says Chart and Axis. So if we hit this pull down menu, we can work with our axes. Horizontal axis. Notice that Google's already picked a label. If it didn't pick a label or it wasn't right, again, you could highlight and change that. You can type in whatever label you need on the x-axis. A good graph should always have a label and the units. And again, we can always change the font color, all that. Notice that we can use the pull down menu also for the vertical axis or the y-axis. We can type the label if we need to. This is already good. We've got a label, we've got units. It really doesn't need to change. And of course, we can do text, color, font size, font style, all that. So that helps us have a proper graph. Graphs always have a title. Graphs always have labels and units on the y-axis and labels and units on the x-axis. So after charts and titles, the next thing on our list here is series. Now it lets us do a couple of fun little visual things that just make the graph look different. One, you can change the color of those dots. See, they're blue. We could pick any color we want to. I'll leave them blue. We can also change the shape. If you don't want them as a circle, you can make them as a triangle. You can make them as a star. It really doesn't matter. And you can even make them bigger if you want to. I find this part the most useful, where it says error bars, data labels, trend line. Most of the time in science class, we want that scatter plot and we want to see what the data is doing. What is it telling us about how X and Y are related? Now from this particular sample data, we can see that's pretty straight. But if we select add a trend line, Google draws a line of best fit. Most of your graphs in science class need to be scatter plots with lines of best fit. This one, the data happens to be linear. and that's great. It looks good. If the data tend to make a curve or something, you could use this pull down and you could change the shape of the graph to best fit the data. But you want to find the line of best fit. And then remember, the graph tells us about the relationship between the x and the y variables, and that relationship is often explained best by the slope of the graph. So here under label, if we tell it through the pull down menu to use the equation, we get the equation for the line of best fit. Since this one's linear, we know that the equation of a line is y equals mx plus b. And look, we have y, or stretch in centimeters instead of just writing a y, equals mx plus b. And m is the slope of the line. So we know the slope of this line is 0.5. Of course, that doesn't mean anything if we don't know units, but we get that from looking at the axes. It's 0.5 centimeters per Newton. So it appears that our spring stretches 0.5 centimeters for every Newton of force exerted on it. And that's how we make the graphs for most of our science classes. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.